unajisikia kupika? QuickBid tunakusort na gas cooker. Ni rahisi sana kupata hii gas cooker. Enda kwenye quickbid.co.ke, fuata maagizo, kisha ekelea kodi ya gas cooker yetu ni CK. Alafu fuatanisha na unique bid yoyote ile unafikiria, CK92, CK106, CK57. Ile unafikiria amount ni shilingi 20. Ama enda kwenye lipa na M-Pesa, ni rahisi sana. 4032353. Hiyo ndio pay bill number, 4032353. Kisha unaweka amount shilingi 20. Tunakuambia kumbuka, kwenye QuickBid ni bidhaa bora zaidi kwenye bei ya chini kwa chini.
Ili kupata skiza tune hii lazima nishike kwa simu yako, bonyeza *811*962#.
Lazima nishike mapema. Nisiposhika hii simu mapema utakasirika. Acha mimi nijua mtu ya marathon na niko na experience kabisa. Niko na experience. If you don't hurry, you will not break the record. Okay, acha nishike hii simu.
Ili kupata skiza tune hii bonyeza *811*962#, *811*962#. 92.9. Hii ni KBC Radio Taifa.
Kila kitu maishani sina sauti yaleta furaha.
Radio.
Sauti ya elimisha yahimiza yatuleta pamoja. Sauti ya Kenya.
Radio Taifa. Next on.
Kuna tabia nyingi sana za kusalimiana kwa mkoana.
Umekuaje la hivi? Ana nini bana? Nini bana msemaje na mse? Mse ya barabarani alafu unaniuliza nini mbaya? Ngenigonga nianguke.
Ungeanguka tukuokote. Nini mbaya?
Sasa nisikitu raha tu ya mkono. Ndio mkono ni soft. Sawa pampa. Ndio nini jina?
Sana nzoa. Salamu gani hizi za fujo? Ni salamu ama ni kututandika makofi na kutandika wewe?
Ni salamu.
Kusalimiana kwa aina hiyo ni ungwana kweli?
A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for creating time to join us on News Check. Today being the 9th day of April 2021. We are so glad that you created time for us. Of course, a lot is happening in the country, and right here on News Check, Biz Check this particular Thursday, we just want to pick up and focus on some of those issues that are shaping the business world as we speak today. We are in the middle of a COVID-19 crisis, which many have termed as not just a health crisis, but also an economic crisis. We have all suffered the impacts that this pandemic has brought to the whole globe at large. And today we just want to spare some time on this particular program to talk about the startups and the small and medium enterprises, talking about the accessibility of the startup capitals. What are some of the options on the table in case you want to start a business, you know, in an environment environment where many have lamented over lack of enough capital, lack of sources of funds for this. And of course, even during this COVID-19 season, where many businesses have had to really suffer the devastating impacts of COVID-19, what are the options on the table for you in case you closed shop and you want to bounce back, or in case you're struggling to stay afloat? What is it that you can be able to do so that you can continue to thrive amidst these trying times? That conversation we'll be having here, and of course later we'll also be talking about the Kenya debt management on the second interview we'll be having on the second hour of this particular program, just to talk about how do we manage our debt and fiscal planning in the country, and how do we invest this particular money that we borrow from international institutions? That will be forming part of our conversation later. But allow me to kickstart straight away with the very first interview this morning. I'm having a sit down with Peter Macharia. Macharia is the founder and chief executive officer, managing director of Achieng Credit Limited. He's somebody who has been in the banking industry for 25 years, and he has a vast of experience in banking. He's also the director of JCL Motors and also JCL Homes Limited. And Macharia brings on board, quite a number of experience in terms of what you need to do, what you need to understand in case you have issues with financing as somebody who wants to get into the business world, because he holds a master's and a bachelor's degree in business administration. We'll be learning more about him and why this gentleman sitting here with me decided to quit his career at the peak where things were really good to get into what he is doing now in the course of this program. But thank you so much for creating time, Macharia.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to the studio today, and I'm grateful for that. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm torn. I can start with a brief background by saying that what prompted me to start off Achieng is the experience I had, having been in the industry and doing the same thing for a cool 25 years. It would have been a challenge to set off and start off something that is new, which I don't have any background information on, and an area that I will need a lot of training and expertise to manage. Mm-hmm. So it was easier for me to pick up from what I was doing and start off Achieng because of the background in knowledge, studies, experience that I had. And those are the areas that most entrepreneurs and startups need to look at. For a startup, don't start off something that you don't have an idea, don't have expertise on, don't have experience on, and you don't have knowledge or you don't have confidence handling
in it.
Yeah.
Use what you have in your hand.
Exactly.
So you used your experience in the banking industry to start up what you are doing today.
Exactly, yes.
I was curious when I was interacting with your profile. You took a VER at 45 years.
Yes.
I mean, and you were doing so well in the banking industry. True. You had risen through the ranks, and served in different banks. Yes. I mean, why would you do that? I mean, was it an easy decision for you to make at that particular time? You were doing well. Many people would actually feel very comfortable being in that space.
That's very true. But comfort zones, or that comfort, is a very dangerous zone, especially when you're in employment. So it's always good to, or rather, personally, when I looked at my performance vis-a-vis the time to leave, I thought that is the best time. Of course, my bosses, my board chairman, my MD, they all sat me down and told me, now look here, you are still young. This is your time to move and come and take up our positions. Yeah. And you are our only hope. Actually, they declined. The first time I did the application, it was declined. I had to literally walk to the office and beg. Mm-hmm. And finally, for my voluntary early retirement package. Mm-hmm. And finally, they agreed. And I said, hallelujah. Because the best time to set off and start a business is when you're young. So that even if what you plan to start fails, because most startups fail after 3 years, you're able to reorganize yourself, remodel yourself, and start your plan 2 or plan B option. So luckily, God was grateful. Whatever I had for plan A succeeded. And we are grateful to God because we are able to serve well over 25,000 clients. We are covering the entire country. most of the SMEs and startups are our customers, and we are happy and willing to always support them through the challenges that they are facing, financial, especially the financial aspect.
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Mashari, you come in basically in the funding aspect, and we'll talk more about that later. But I want us to begin this conversation from where it all begins. Right now, there are so many people who've lost their jobs courtesy of the pandemic. And this has kept us thinking, you know, we really rely on this end month, you're paid a salary and you're safe, you're comfortable. But courtesy of what has happened during this pandemic, many people are actually thinking of going the business way, having something of your own that you can control.
Yes.
So how does it all start? In case there's somebody who's watching this program and they want to start a business, a startup, something that they've not done before. They're just having a meeting with themselves. What should they consider? What are some of the issues that come as priority? Things that are important to consider before you even settle for a particular type of business.
Thank you. That's a very good question, because it's a question that's affecting most of our check-off clients. Check-off clients are customers who borrow loans and repay their salaries. And currently we also lend to all the civil servants countrywide. And it's an experience that our customers have been grappling with. But at Achieng Credit, we offer free business consultancy. And those customers who have that challenge, we are always glad to take them through. I can cite a few examples. A good example is most of the hotel industry staff, like some chefs, or let's say the ones who are in the catering department. You find that they had taken a facility in our organization, but the employer, the organization has literally closed. As we all know, most of the tourism segments or sectors have been adversely affected by COVID. So you find a chef who was servicing his facility very well, regularly, with no challenges, without any pay. When they come to offices, we now ask them to repackage themselves, because if you are a chef, you are now at home, you know how to bake cakes and maybe some confectionery or some things that you can sell, even samosas. We now request them to take that skill and do it at home. If you've ever been to China, most of the industries, they are called cottage industries. In China, most of the backyards of most homes have some small industries. They're making tiles. So for this chef, we request them to start baking mandazis or samosas or some biscuits or birthday cakes, and even deliver within their neighborhood where they live, within the estate, within the flat. And you see some of them, most of them have really done very well. Picked up, yeah. Another segment is like the ones who are running restaurants and pubs. We've been requesting them to now start take home deliveries. If you take 1, 2, 3 in the evening and you are their customer, they can ask for a small token, pay the boda rider, and deliver the canned beer to your home at the comfort of your home. So that whatever stocks they have or whatever operation expenses they have, they're able to meet them. They're able to pay rent, salaries, because they've remodeled their businesses and repackaged it to survive during these trying times.
All right, so what is it that should inform that decision? Because you're describing very practical ideas that can work, you know, especially during this time of COVID.
Yes.
So what should I look for when I want to settle on a particular idea? Because many people start, they've actually done like about 6 types of businesses. You start this one, it fails after a few months. You go to this one, it's sort of like you're not sure about what you really want to do.
Thank you very much. Then the first priority and number one item that such a person should look at is the skill. Whatever skill you have in your hands. If you are a chef, you know how to bake cakes, start with that. Because already you do not need to be trained how to bake. You just need now to look for some small startup capital to buy flour and maybe a few implements there. And then you don't even need to incur the cost of delivery. Walk. It's healthy. Others, like we had some teachers who had cars, but now schools are closed. What do you do? Do you stay with the car at home and start mourning and saying, oh, the schools are closed, my employer is closed? No, 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 no.
Especially if you're in a private school.
Exactly. We request them to take that car, either go to the village or go to the nearest market, buy fruits and start selling. So by the end of the day, you're able to go home with 10,000. The other option, you can use the digital apps. You can either join Uber, Taxify, or whichever taxi app is available. And there you are. Your business is in your phone. And you start getting some, feeding your family, getting some income. So we've really helped to mentor and to advise and to repackage and to set most of these people who are salaried. We've set them on new business platforms. Yeah.
It's always good to have a plan B, because you never know when plan A can fail.
Exactly.
And that is what part of what COVID has taught us. Mr. Macharia, I just want us to talk about how bad the problem is. We all know that businesses have been affected during this COVID-19. Right now we're in the third wave. Things are just getting from bad to worse.
Yes.
As somebody who directly interacts with these people, those who run small and medium enterprises, I mean, how bad is the situation? How does it translate to the impact it has had on the day-to-day life of the ordinary mwananchi?
Thank you. The impact is there. We can't shy away from saying that the micro, small and medium enterprises have been adversely affected. More so because the support that maybe we expected from different organizations has not been forthcoming. In terms of the quality of or the impact of the negative impact on the businesses, it's being aggravated by the aspect that there's no circulation of money in the market. Number two, the movement of people is also very low because of the curfew and the restriction of movement. And then number three, we have instances whereby, like now, the movement of the inter-county movement, because most of these counties are interrelated. Because you find that Nairobi is a concrete jungle. We don't do any farming here. So farm produce comes from up country.
Yeah, to feed the people
of Nairobi. And vice versa. Now the money in Nairobi goes to up country, the farmers and all that. So those are areas that have adversely affected the most businesses. However, it should not be taken as the dead end. It's always good to convert the lemon into lemonade. So that negative impact, it should be a learning experience for each and every one of us. So the areas that I'm advising most businesses to do, including our own organization, Achieng Credit, we have set up a savings fund, an emergency fund, so that even if there are months that we will not do any business, we have monies that are able to sustain the organization, pay salaries. Like our organization, we've made sure that we've not retrenched any of our members of staff. So all the way from last year, we've sustained the same levels, no adverse effects on staff, no adverse effect on our customers or on any of our service providers. So those are the areas that most businesses need to look at, even if it's a huge business, it's a corporate business. Let's all learn to have a savings culture so that when the worst comes to worst, there's continuity. We have a contingent emergency fund to sustain the business so that everything moves smoothly, nothing is affected, and you're able to focus on the business goals.
It's called being optimistic.
Exactly,
I like the positive vibe that you bring this morning. All hope is not lost.
Yes, yes.
We've learned there that businesses need to save for a dry day, for that bad day. Like, you never know when it will come. So how will you survive? How will you thrive? And that bad day is during this COVID-19 season for many businesses. I want us to look at the ripple effect some of these restrictions to curb the spread of COVID-19 is likely to have on our economy generally. What are we looking at in the coming days? We've begun to experience a bit of an economic downturn, but what are we looking at going forward?
Generally, the economy will have it will be affected negatively because one, the tax incomes or taxes will be low. So therefore, the projects that the government had planned to undertake will be adversely affected. And then the focus, you see the focus on the government currently was on development projects. But now we have now to go back to the basics and ensure that our health facilities are well catered for, so that simple things like oxygen plants, oxygen cylinders, or oxygen supply in a hospital, we should forget about it. We should be able to ensure that now the resources we get capture and ensure that all hospitals countrywide are well funded, well kitted with those basic medical facilities and equipment, so that now our people are safe and happy. Then the other area that economy might have a negative impact is on the big projects or big corporates like KQ or the airline industry. It's been affected, and you see that the ripple effect of some of those economic impacts is that before those airlines are able to pick up and start making profit, it takes time. Because even if you have an organization or a hotel and you lock it, there are some operational costs that you can't shy away from or run away from, like security. You must pay for security lighting. The other bills could be low, but there are those consistent or recurrent expenses.
Even just the general maintenance, of the facility.
The building, it needs to be catered for. So those are the areas that our economy and our gurus in economic or advisors of the economic planning and all that will have to grapple with. Yes, and also the issue of staff redundancy, because most organizations have their unemployment level will be quite high because most organizations have retrenched their staff. Yes.
If you look at the environment right now, the context in which businesses are operating right now, in terms of the demand and what is sellable right now, what would you say are some of the businesses that are likely to thrive and make a boom vis-a-vis those that are likely to really suffer during these particular times, based on what people are needing right now, people are demanding right now in terms of what they are consuming or using in terms of services and even products? Which businesses are likely to make more profit even during these hard times, and which ones are likely to suffer going forward?
Thank you. Let's start with the positive part. The businesses that are thriving currently, or are the ones that have been thriving since COVID started, are the medical and pharmaceutical industry. Because COVID needs a medical intervention. So medicines, supplies, chemists, those ones have not been affected by COVID. Then number two is the financial institutions. Although on the flip side, institutions like ours, like Achieng Credit, we are lending. But on the negative part, our customers are having major challenges in terms of repayment because incomes are low, circulation of money is low, businesses have been affected. So it needs a very well managed credit analysis team. So that they can, and a very good credit administrative team, so that you're able to manage both lending and loan repayments. Then the other business that is thriving is the agricultural sector, because people will need to eat, whether there's COVID or
not.
We must
people
eat.
have to eat.
So I've seen most of my customers venture into farming, me included. I've also started some small subsistence farming, so that at least we're able to maintain that consistent supply of things, simple things like lemon, which is on very high demand, garlic.
Right now,
Yeah, those things, you just plant, you have a kitchen garden, so that you also have your own supply. So I think those are the three main industries that are thriving. And on the flip side, the ones that have been affected is number one is the tourism industry. Number two is the educational institutions, because most of the colleges are closed. And then number three are the religious organizations, because most churches are also not operating.
Are they under the business bracket? I was just like, what do you mean churches? Are they falling under the business category nowadays?
Of course, what happens?
What did I miss?
They don't fall per se on the business segment. But believe you me, most churches support academic institutions, medical institutions. They also fund those people who don't have food, who need shelter. It's a fallback. It's a fallback situation whereby, or rather, they support the government in most of the non-income-based areas and support. It's like what? It's like a good ethical business that needs to be there.
We have to have it somehow. So how can such businesses, stay afloat during these trying times? You had touched on quite a bit of examples of how businesses can, sort of change to other strategies and do other things. Just tell us more a little bit about how they can stay afloat during these trying times. What are some of the unique advices you can share with them?
Thank you. The first thing that all organizations worldwide currently they are looking at is survival. I'm a very good follower and person of Jack Ma. He's a billionaire who is based in China. And he has said time and again that all businesses currently during COVID time just need to survive. You don't need to make profits. And therefore, survival means, are you able to pay your staff salaries? Are you able to remain afloat? Are you able to operate so that you don't close your doors or your counters? Are you able to pay rent? Are you able to show that you are paying these taxes, these high taxes, but now your taxes are lower because of the business volumes? Those are the things that a good business or all corporates or all organizations, whether small, micro or huge, are looking at. That is management of operational expenses. Because if you fail to manage your expenses and incomes and profits are low or not even there, you'll be eating into your capital. So in a short while, you find that you've eaten into your stock and you just technically close shop.
So right now it's just the bare minimum is to survive, to keep the business going, not necessarily thinking about how to make more profit.
Yes.
Wow, that's a nice one. As a creditor though, how has this changes and these restrictions affected your way of doing things as a creditor at Jijenge?
Well, thank you. The demand at Jijenge Credit or in most organizations that lend, the demand for money is very high. Because people need money, but not for business, not for commercial use, but for sustainability. And we always say, I always tell my staff in the office that we should never finance lifestyle. What I mean by that is that we should not finance, you should not borrow money to go and buy food. The moment a client walks in and says, I want to borrow money to go and buy food, that's a facility that we decline on the spot.
So what should people borrow for?
People should borrow for business, for commercial use, because if you borrow 100,000, you will not return less than 100,000. You return the 100,000 plus profit or interest. And therefore, you need to work hard and ensure that 100,000 is available, and you've paid your interest and you've made some profit out of it. Yeah. So in our analysis or credit analysis, those are the areas we look at so that we don't lend for lifestyle or for sustenance. We should only lend for business or to grow, for stock, increasing your stock, and for profit, for income generating projects.
If somebody wants to borrow to furnish a house or to buy a house or to just buy a gadget or something. Is that something that is advisable?
Yes, that one we encourage because, you know, currently worldwide, most organizations, most staff are working from home. We've had a very huge loan application from our portfolio. If we segment on sectors, IT appliances and equipment, we've seen a very huge upsurge on all the loan applications for iPads, laptops, and these internet connection systems. That one we support and we encourage because it will help you maintain your income. Because you can't say you're working from home and you can't connect with your employer.
Yeah, that's true. But it all goes back to the why, you know?
Yeah.
Even if you're buying this equipment,
gadget,
why are you buying them?
Yeah.
It has to have some money value that comes with it.
So those ones we're encouraging because we are supporting employees, because some employers are not buying the gadgets for their employees. So you're being told now, if you want to sustain your job, ensure you have this is a list of equipment we want you to fit at your home, so that you're able to take care of them properly. Because they can't do that to all maybe they have 1,000 staff. In that case, we are supporting the purchase of those. Yeah.
Okay.
So purchase of equipment, yes, that one we support. And we finance.
What are some of the unfortunate reasons people put on the table for taking up a loan? Things that you'd like Kenyans to know this morning that, you know, if we go this direction, then we could just be missing the point. Cases you've handled or, you know, reasons people give for wanting to take up a loan that are not really advisable?
Thank you. The main reason that the areas that we used to outrightly decline loan applications for is during that wave of that betting craze, which I'm happy the government
cracked the whip
on them. Because most of the youth would come and borrow 100,000 just for betting. And you know, betting is something you're not sure of it. Those equipment are calibrated in such a way that out of 100,000 people who bet, maybe only one of them gets.
But they say if you're not a risk taker, you will not succeed in this life. So.
But the best risk to take is now in those areas that I've mentioned: farming, business. At least you're sure you can't lose 100%. But for betting, those sport betting, craze and all that, those are applications that we usually told. We've always told our clients from the word go, declined. We will not lend. At Achieng credit,
betting is a no-no.
Yeah. Because in our loan applications, you feel the reason why you are borrowing. What are the funds for? So if you write there betting, these are the companies. We just
do you advise clients though on some of these issues when they knock at your door? You take them through a process?
Yeah, we take them through the requirements, the process, and of course we listen in to them and hear what they're planning to do with the funds, and whether they've done a proper feasibility study, project management, and whether they've done all those comparatives. Yeah.
All right. We'll pick up this particular conversation when we come back, because many Kenyans are actually struggling in poverty, courtesy of the misguided loans that they took up. Some have had to give up their property and all that. So you'll keep on just advising us more on how to go about this. When we come back from this particular break, you're watching BizCheck this particular Thursday. Thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, more still lined up for you on the other side. Do stay with us.
I'm not leaving this hospital until I know what's wrong with my daughter.
Unfortunately, the tests confirm that she's very ill. There is currently no cure for Anna's condition.
Doctor, please, this is our little... girl.
I'm scared, Mom.
Me too. We're not giving up.
Like a small boat.
Free her from this.
I might only have one man.
When this baby girl fell 30 feet, she hit her head just right, and it didn't kill her, and it didn't paralyze her.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
This is a very sure bet. I'm in Imara now at 7. I'm very sure I'll be in town by 7:30.
Just the comfort. The comfort and the peace of mind you can read a book on the train.
Training kabisa kabisa. Tumepanga sana kabisa kwa sababu ni comfortable na bei ni rahisi sana kabisa. Very cheap.
Alhamisi saa 2:30 usiku kwenye KBC Channel 1. Next on.
Naomba kidogo. Basi hata huyo nini alisema hivyo. Alafu akamfanya hivi. Akamuuliza tena. Waala baby.
Bebe nitaona vipi na mpiga macho hivi.
Basi hata huyo nini hata hivyo. Wewe ni mtajibu wewe. Hebu chapa na mjadi kuna wenyewe. Yasikia wewe. Huku kuna wenyewe. Saa 7 ni saa 5 mpaka saa 6:30. Umesikia? Nilizopenda hizo.
This weekend on KBC Channel 1.
Kweli Nairobi ni shamba la mawe.
Why? Did someone steal your stuff?
Not just someone, a pastor. Guy, a pastor.
A pastor. He must be very smart up here.
With what money? Please.
What seems to be the problem here?
The problem is we have been complaining. We are not understanding what you are saying. And you keep insisting. Lighting this down. Light what down?
Look, I'm your teacher. I'm supposed to give you only 30%. The rest comes from your own efforts. Teacher, so did you tell us to pay 100% school fees for 30% knowledge? What is missing? You said pesa zingine zinaenda wapi? Maybe we should go on for the rest of the sentence.
Classmates, every Saturday on KBC.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Biz Check, and of course today we are talking matters to do with startups and micro and small and medium enterprises. This particular morning, talking about issues funding, what you need to know before you even think about that business idea you want to invest in, and of course, in case you want to apply for a loan, what are some of the factors you need to consider before you make that very big decision? And in studio, I've been having a sit down with Peter Macharia. Peter Macharia is the CEO of Achieng Credit Limited, just sharing his insights on this particular subject. Thank you for staying with us. And of course, appreciating those who are watching us online. Tonja Matthias, you're watching. Thank you so much for creating time. Millicent Adisa, you're watching from Kangemi. Roberto Roba and Kabianga, you're watching also. Thank you so much. I'll be sampling some of your views as we continue. In case you have any question for my guest, of course, you can also use that platform to post your question there, and we'll be answering it as we continue at Serfine_Achieng at KBC Channel 1. Of course, is our official social media handle. Please interact with us and engage us on social media. Mr. Macharia, before we took the break, I shared something about how many families right now are really facing issues courtesy of the loans, the misguided loans that they took. And they're having challenges, servicing those particular loans. I'd like us to address this issue in two fronts. First, let's start with those who are in this current situation, the COVID-19 pandemic. They took a well-guided loan, of course, for good reasons, but courtesy of the economic downturn, they're currently struggling to facilitate the loan. They've really tried to adjust, and it's not becoming very easy for them. How can they maneuver through this situation? Because we know the consequences that come with failure to service your loan in the required time. How can they maneuver?
Thank you, Serfine. I always advise, and I've always advised my clients or the customers that I've served, be it in the bank or at Achieng Credit, that when you take a loan, do not shy away from seeing your account manager to explain out your problems, because most of the problems are genuine. And it is normal for borrowers to have financial challenges in terms of inability to repay or even total loss of their assets. So the first point of call is your account manager. When COVID started in March, we were approached by many customers because they were caught off guard. And we had to give them moratoriums, even for 1 year. We have customers who have not paid a single loan, a single installment for the last 1 year.
And this does not attract any penalties?
It does not attract any penalties. It does not attract any, we don't even use any other method of recovering our money, no. We just hold the facility where it is for 1 year. And that comes about when the customer or the affected person engages the financer. You're supposed to engage your financer because we're also human beings, and we are alive to the fact that there is COVID. You do both. You do a letter, and you also come with a letter and explain yourself, so that the content in your letter can be clarified by yourself. Or the areas your account manager will not understand, the phrases you've used in the letter, there is actual clarification. Once you do that, you're able to give various moratoriums. You can suspend interest, you can suspend the installment amount, or you can suspend both, or we can even give you a total 100% waiver. We can say this case, because there are those genuine cases whereby a client is admitted in a hospital. He's the sole breadwinner. He's hospitalized, and he can't earn any income. That one we give 100% waiver. We don't charge anything. We
just forgo the loan.
We forgo
but it has to be documented, the
it's
request?
Documented. The request, as you must bring evidence from the hospital and say, Mr. So-and-so or Madam So-and-so is hospitalized at this hospital, and you will stay here for 6 months or 1 year. Therefore, once you have it, now the guardian or the relative now writes a covering letter and say, customer so-and-so is incapacitated, he cannot be able to make any economic activity. We put it in the file, we verify the documents, of course. At times we even call the hospital. If they are genuine and we had given him 100,000, we will only cap the loan at 100,000, because at least the principal must be recovered, because we've also borrowed from financial institutions. And by and large, that financial institution is lending public deposits to us. So if we fail to pay, it will affect their savings accounts and their depositors and all that. So it's a chain reaction, which needs to be protected also. But for those genuine cases, we don't charge anything at all. 100,000, the day you get well, or if your relatives are able to pay 100,000, well and good.
Why do you think, Kenyans go wrong? Because some find their properties being auctioned, they find themselves in very awkward positions. Others have actually just suffered some mental health issues, the stress levels that come with these loans. Families have broken just because of loans. Where do we miss the point in terms of addressing the consequences that come with failure to repay your loan?
Thank you, Serfine. The main problem which I've noted personally, because I've been involved in credit for the last 30 years, the main problem is lack of communication or dialogue. You see, most people have problems, but they keep the problems to themselves.
But will the banks listen?
You see, now, they need to start by talking it out with their significant others. If you are in a house and you have a wife and children, please discuss with them. They will also give you ideas or options on what to do. Number 2, also come and engage the account manager, the person who lent you the money, the officer, the credit officer who handled you. Sit down with them, tell them the challenges you're facing through. Don't run away. Never run away. Never try to, for example, hide the car or remove tracking devices or maybe go across the border and sell it. It will not work because now, you see, you'll have put yourself on a different platform. But if you come and say, your assets are here, I'm having these challenges, help me navigate through. Believe you me, we are human beings and we will take you through, and we might not even charge you a coin over and above what we gave you.
Okay.
Yeah, we are at Achieng, we are a caring, listening partner. We listen and support our customers to the last bit.
All right. Just out of curiosity, is there even plans, or is it even already happening, where probably if you're a couple and one person wants to apply for a loan, consent has to be from both? Because the reason I'm asking this question is because there are families that receive this shock after one member has failed to repay the loan, and you get some uninvited guests knocking and they want to auction your property. Is it even fair, and can something be done to avert such?
Thank you, Serfine. For when you're lending against matrimonial homes, landed property with title deeds, there must be spousal consent. You cannot borrow on a family home and your other partner is not involved. She must come to offices and sign for the consent. She must also go through the loan agreement and see how much is the installment, what is the loan period, and what are the terms and conditions of the facility. So it's once you have it's a legal requirement basically. It's not even
so all financial institutions actually
that one is a standard requirement. Yes, but for things like movable assets like now cars, cows, mobile phones, you see, those are more of personal items. Yeah. And therefore, things like now, for example, a car. The best thing to ensure that both of you are involved is to ensure that if you are a spouse, your name is in that logbook. So the other spouse cannot go and claim the car is theirs by themselves and borrow behind your back
without you knowing,
and then fail to pay. Yeah. But always seek to add your name to the logbook. Yeah. It ensures that...
That's another conversation that maybe we should create another forum for when it comes to property ownership and registration of these properties. But then the marriage has to be registered, right? For that document to be considered valid, or for that requirement to hold? Not
necessarily, because you can... you see, having a car registered in joint names, you necessarily don't need to be married or to have marriage documents. It shows that that asset both of you contributed, or you are an interested party. So whichever borrower is seeing that logbook must ask for the other party. You cannot sign a loan agreement without the other person who is jointly registered in the logbook being involved. It's a legal requirement. And you don't need to go that extra step of asking for marriage documents, no.
All right. These are some of the questions that Kenyans would really want to know, because it has brought a lot of issues, especially when somebody fails to honor their side of the bargain, and the family has to be affected in the process. All right. So looking at what is happening right now, people are also curious to know whether is it a good time to take a loan, or it's not advisable to take up a loan, looking at the economic situation right now. What are some of the factors that one needs to consider
Thank you, Serfine.
in terms of timing?
We cannot say that there's a time which is bad or good for taking a loan. What a loan calls for is proper planning. That is the first step. Number 2, is it a viable project? Do proper research. Do a SWOT analysis on wherever you're going to invest the money in. And then look at all the external and internal factors that can affect the facility. Because there are those people who are borrowing currently. Because if you've been given an order to supply, let's say, masks or medical equipment somewhere, at least that one is a viable project. You'll finally be paid. So you need to do a lot of also background checks on the supplier, the person you're supplying the goods to, because you might supply and then they disorganize you in loan repayment because of delay in their back-end or accounting processes. So those are the areas that, the broad areas that someone looks at before you borrow a facility.
All right. There is no good, there is no bad time. Exactly. What you need to consider is why you're borrowing.
Yes, and the planning.
And the planning.
Yes.
All right. So as we're just about to wrap up, how can the government assist in improving the environment for, the small and medium enterprises, just to make the burden lighter for them in terms of policy, in terms of support? Is there something that you feel is a gap that needs to be filled, and how?
Thank you, Serfine. Yeah, there are areas that we have grey gaps in terms of supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises. That one is in the area of most BMOs. Most BMOs are business management organizations. Only a few are involved or invited by the government in those platforms and decision making. And therefore, they need to also repackage themselves so that they are able to offer good solutions, offer good discussions, and advocate in a more professional manner, so that the government can also, the technocrats can also give them an ear. Then the other area that the government can support businesses is on infrastructure. That is roads, communication, facilities, those things that support the value chain, the entire value chain from the farmer to the consumer, or from one country to the other, or one county to the other. All those peripheral support systems need to be tip-top, so that now the farmers, for example, if they want to work at night or do business at night, is there enough security? Is there enough lighting? Are there enough shade? Like now, it's a rainy season. Those bus stops, like the ones that are being done by NMS, is there enough rain shielding covers? And all those things that the government is doing. But I know, speaking from an informed position, I know the government is doing its best. It's supporting the micro, small, and medium enterprises. The Minister of Trade, I know she's doing the best. The Minister of Finance is also supporting the micro, small, and medium enterprises fully. And the entire executive, I know it's really supporting the government in that line. Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Macharia, for creating time for us. As a final word, just looking at the trends, people are increasingly shying away from the loans that are offered by banks and going into SACCOs and the quick loans on the mobile applications. Probably just explain this trend, and what does the future hold for our country in terms of, borrowing?
Well, borrowing is something that cannot be wished away. It started in those historical days, before Christ, and it's something that is also evolving very fast. That's why we've even come up with the mobile lending apps. However, I would like to put some word of caution that when you have that impulse borrowing, that easy borrowing, and so that you're able to borrow from the comfort of your sitting room without planning, without proper research, it can land you in very hot soup, because that is money that you've not planned for. and you might end up using it for consumption. The traditional borrowing, I would advocate for the traditional borrowing where somebody walks in, has those application forms that have leading questions or questions that will jangle your mind that you are really applying for a facility, and these are the terms, these are the conditions, and you are sending here. You're also being requested to offer some form of security and all that. It gives somebody some sense of ownership, as opposed to when you borrow easily on phone.
On phone.
Because that one can land the country in a very tight corner, because if everybody is in CRB, what will happen?
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I wish you had more time, because these are tips that people need, especially during this time where everybody is in need of cash, and easy cash is everywhere.
Yes.
So how do you go about making that decision on whether you need a loan, how much, and what is the plan that you have for that money? Thank you, Peter Masharia, the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Jijenge Credit Limited, for creating time for us. Of course, BizCheck continues in just a bit. I told you we're going to be having in the second hour another interview that touches on Kenya's debt management, and we will just focus more on what also we need to do, because today it's all about borrowing, it's all about loans, it's all about how do we then invest this money in the right place. Stay with us. We are coming back with that.
Thank you very much. It was a nice show.
Ilayska umada.
There's something wrong with her little girl.
They need to calm
I'm
down.
not leaving this hospital until I know what's wrong with my daughter.
Unfortunately, the tests confirm that she's very ill. There is currently no cure for Anna's condition.
Doctor, please. This is our little... Yeah. I'm scared.
Me too. We're not giving up.
Like a small boat.
We heard from this.
Might only have one boat.
Can you even hear me?
You're gonna slow down. This is my first song. Take back my life.
So you're telling me that when this baby girl fell 30 feet, she hit her head just right, and it didn't kill her, and it didn't paralyze her?
Next on.
Kuna tabia nyingi sana za kusalimiana, kuwa mkuana.
Umekuwaje lakini? Sana wewe ni nini bwana? Nini bwana? Msemaje na mse? Mse anatoka barabarani alafu unaniuliza nini mbaya? Ungenigonga nianguke. Ningeanguka tukuokote.
Nini mbaya?
Sasa msikiti raha tu ya mkono. Unajua mkono wako ni soft. Kaa pampa. Ina nini jina?
Sana ndoa. Salamu gani hizi za fujo?
Ni salamu hapa ni kututandika makofi na kutandika wewe. Ni salamu.
Kusalimiana kwa aina hiyo ni ungwana kweli.
All right, welcome back to the program. We are so glad that you stayed on. And in case you're just joining us, this is Biz Check. On this Thursday, we are discussing how we are just going to manage our debt situation in the country. On the first part, we focused on you as an individual. But on this second part, now we want to talk about the national environment when it comes to borrowing and how we invest this money. And today, on the second part of the interview, we are going to be talking about debt management and fiscal planning, a conversation that is coming amidst a very heated debate concerning the recently approved IMF loan, the 253 billion shillings loan for Kenya, which the International Monetary Fund approved. Of course, we're supposed to be receiving the first batch of it by June this particular year. But we've seen Kenyans really angered about this and going online to pour their frustrations, calling on the International Monetary Fund to cancel this particular loan. What are some of the dynamics for this loan to be cancelled? Is it even a justified, anger for Kenyans to have at this particular time, considering our dynamics and our appetite for borrowing as a country? So we want to talk about that and much more. But of course, I'll be having this conversation with Kenneth Okwaro, the International Development Specialist. And he is an International Development Specialist and also the Executive Director, Africa Center for People Institutions. Thank you so much for creating time for us.
Thank you very much.
Before I begin engaging you, Kenneth, I'd just like us to hear what our legislators have to say. You know, we are all asking ourselves, the reason Kenyans are angry, the reason why Kenyans are furious about this is the issue on sustainability of this public debt. Is Kenya's debt sustainable? That's the big question people are asking themselves this morning. This is part of what some of our legislators had to say recently concerning this. All right, we will be, taking you through that in a bit, just to hear what our leaders are saying. Is it sustainable? But what do you think? Engage us on social media at KBC Channel 1, at Serfine_Achieng. And of course, we'll share some of your views as we continue. But Kenneth, I don't know. Let me just shoot it directly to you. Whether you think it is sustainable, is it something we can manage?
Right. As I was beginning to say when we were beginning this conversation, that question, if you ask different people, you'll get different answers. If you ask ordinary Kenyans who are experiencing this economy, who have got to deal with issues, the cash crunch and reduction in public services and things like that, and unemployment, they will tell you they don't think the debt that our country has taken over this period of time is sustainable. But then if you ask other people like the international development institutions like the IMF and the World Bank that provide credit to Kenya, they'll tell you that the matrices and the calculations they do, they still feel that the country is sustainable. So it's a yes and no question. I believe the Kenyans who feel the economy and say if the debt is the reason why there are no jobs, if the debt is the reason why country governments don't have enough funding for running health facilities where they live, then they are suffering. But then you want to look at what people like IMF are saying, because the issue of debt sustainability is not just determined by say how people are feeling within an economy, but there are very many matrices. For example, looking at the ability to pay, is the economy growing according to them? And I've looked at a lot of this analysis done by the IMF and the World Bank, and they argue that over the past 3 years, when just before the COVID-19 pandemic, the economy, the country's economy was growing. I think it was growing at 6.3%, slumping a little bit in 2019. Then COVID-19 came in 2020, and then now in 2021, the way they are looking at things, they believe that the economy can rebound, and therefore, what is said is that the economy is at risk of debt distress, but according to them, it's not necessarily that. It's unsustainable. Okay. But that is the view of the IMF.
It depends on how you look at it. It depends on who is answering this question.
Yes, my view, and I am with the Kenyans. I feel that debt is an instrument for economic development, and if at a given particular time we are looking at, say, the past 4 or 5 years since this second regime of Uhuru Kenyatta, everyone has been complaining. The pockets are dry. County governments don't have money. then what is the debt helping us with? So in my view, I think if we continue the way we are going, we have already reached the place where it's unsustainable. And what's going on right now is just mathematics and calculations.
All right. We'll come back and pick up, you know, from now we want to really dissect how much are we borrowing and what are we doing? And even looking at the history of our borrowing as a country, what have we done with that money?
Right.
Yes, but let's just listen to what some of our legislators have to say concerning this particular subject.
A big issue on pending bills. Pending bills are literally everywhere in all ministries. And this is a concern that was raised by members of parliament and with members of the committee. And we have clearly said that Treasury should have a proper roadmap on how to address the pending bills.
Is the ballooning in incomplete projects. Honorable Speaker, there are projects, the way the chair budget has alluded to, that began about 38 years ago. There are projects which are 10 years ago, which are 10 years old. We would want, Honorable Speaker, since these projects are now reflecting at the moment, let the Auditor General give us their values, their present estimates, and evaluate all of them.
The National Treasury must do what is called impact analysis. When you reduce a state department or an agency money, you cut their money, you must assess the impact it will have on those projects.
There you have it. That's the mood. Members of Parliament, they're just sharing their thoughts concerning this. And it's something that has really shaped the conversation for a better part of, you know, the last few days. Online, it has been crowded with a different opinion concerning this particular subject, our debt situation, our debt management situation in the country. I don't know whether you feel, Kenneth, you know, whether the fury among Kenyans is justified.
Yeah, I believe that people elect politicians to go to government so that they can sort out their ordinary problems. Things like food and shelter and healthcare and education and safety. If those things, if government is not able to provide or to assure citizens of those things, then they are justified to be angry. And they're angry because they feel they're paying the tax and they are providing government with the authority that they need to do the things that they are not doing. So I agree with a lot of people who are angry out there that where it has reached, our economy is not doing as well as it's supposed to do, especially for those basic things that they need or they depend on in terms of livelihoods. Even if you talk to business, businesses will tell you that there's nothing. The tax rate has gone high, government has expanded the tax base. We're paying tax on almost everything. But what is the return? Because normally the argument is government is collecting all this tax, is getting all this debt, it is investing it in the economy. We're saying we're doing infrastructure projects, energy and all those things. But what is the return to the economy? Because if all this investment was returning into the economy, then people would be feeling it. So that if you're a businessman, if you have a small kinyozi somewhere, the cost of power is lower, for example. You get, or the services that are required to do that business are lower, so that you get revenue so that to sort yourself and also to pay government. But that's not what's happening. So people are asking, then why is government taking all this money? Because we are saying we are collecting 17% of our GDP in terms of taxes, isn't it? We are saying we are collecting debt, we are running towards 7 trillion plus, right? Where is the money going? So if an ordinary person asks that question, then they're justified because they're waiting for government to provide them services. And our analysis just indicates that we have taken so much debt to the extent that government is not able to provide those services. Why? Because we have so much to repay. Let's say you were talking here earlier on, just before this show, about private debt. The way people are taking money from all this money. Right.
The PAP loans that are just everywhere, just waiting for you on the phone.
Well, we are not supposed to compare private debt and public debt.
Yeah, true.
But it's a good analogy that you are paid 30,000 shillings. But before you get your check at the end of the month, you have debt you need to repay back like 25,000. So you have 5,000 bob
left.
So
You'll
this
have to
5,000
borrow.
bob is for your everything, your health, for your education, for kila kitu, you see. So in my view, that's what is going on in our country. We have made not very good debt management decisions in the past, I think almost a decade, like from around 2012 or from 2013 to now. That has increased our debt portfolio, which has meant that our debt repayment obligations are also high. So here in a year, we are paying 900 billion towards repaying debt. Once all that has gone out repaying debt,
That's slightly under a trillion.
Yes, and our budget is how much? About 3.3 trillion. Then you have, public sector needs to run. So you need to run government and you need to pay salaries and all those things. What it means is what remains there for development, which is what affects the ordinary citizen, is very small. And that's why people are complaining, because money is not there in the economy. Services are not there to enable them to do business, to earn a living or to improve their livelihoods. And therefore, we're all stuck here. Government,
Okay,
yes.
okay. So, Kenneth, how far can this complaining situation go? What impact? For example, the 200 people who signed an online petition against this IMF loan, what impact does that have? What other alternatives can Kenyans explore to really rubber stamp this
their opinion,
their standpoint?
So to speak. I began by saying people elect governments to get into, politicians to get into government to deal with these issues. Clearly, what Kenyans are saying is the people they elected are not handling the economy or issues of public debt in the right way. Normally, in many countries, you'll hear that somebody has resigned or somebody has said, this is our new framework, the way we are going to deal with it. But it looks like it's not happening. So that's what drove Kenyans to that rant. According to me, it's a big rant, because we are telling IMF that we don't want this money. As whom? We have already sent our representatives as Kenyans.
Exactly,
Why?
that's why I asked, what impact is it going to have?
It has impact because the way democracy works, the way we're governed, is that we donate our authority to people who are in government. But it doesn't mean we've given it to them, kabisa. It can reach a point where we say, we gave you authority to do these things that we don't think you're doing them, so we are taking matters to our hands. And these things have happened. You went to Greece where they said we are not paying back money to whoever. You've gone to countries where people have gone into civil disobedience. We're not saying that that is the avenue that Kenyans should go, but they have a right. They have a right to vent. They have a right to tell people who they feel are not acting in the right way with their government to do things differently. So when guys went on Twitter and on Facebook and on whatever, on social media, they were doing that because for lack of a place to vent their anger and their ideas. Because you would believe that in our country where there's a constitution with all these things about public participation, that it should have already been thought that this is a big opinion in the public domain that people need to listen to hear what. In some countries, you'd hear somebody has said, I resign, I have stopped that loan, until we hear what people are saying in the public, until we provide a better solution to handling these things. But that was not done. You get. But to come back to your question about how far does this go, in my view, what our government has remaining in terms of macroeconomic policy now is debt. That's how we are.
That's how we are. The unfortunate reality that you're painting this morning.
In the next 12 months, that's how we are going to run our economy to stay afloat, because that's actually what we're going to do.
This is not a good thing, right?
It's not.
Yeah.
With COVID-19, we have conceded that all those projections about economic growth this year, a lot of them are not going to be as we expected. So in terms of revenues, we are not going to collect as much as we expected we are going to collect, isn't it? So how do you do development if you're not doing development through revenues that you collect from people? And we are not the country that has natural resources and those things that we can tap from. And also, we don't receive grants like we used to a long time ago, that we would say we are going to expect this country to give us this number of billions to plug in. It means the only mechanism remaining for government is debt, and therefore that conversation about how it's managed is very important.
All right. How has COVID-19, from your own perspective, worsened the debt situation in the country?
In many ways.
Yeah.
In many ways. The first thing is that One, when COVID happened, we needed money to respond, isn't it? So to buy those PPEs, to buy things that were necessary to protect healthcare workers, but also to do the testing and all that. So we needed an extra fund to deal with that. And therefore, that is when you had, I think, around May last year, when I think the same IMF gave our country money and they got resources from elsewhere. So that is one. We needed funding to respond. Two, COVID-19 affected the economy itself. So we are saying that there's a slump. I think we said we grew by 0.2%, while the previous year it was 6.3%. You see, so when the economy is constricted, it means government revenues have also constricted.
Limited,
So where then would government get money to continue running its projects, to continue running the government? Public debt, that's another thing. The other thing is, I think during the pandemic, our currency vis-a-vis the US dollar, which is the currency which a lot of our debt is held, our currency has been weaker. And therefore, it has affected also our debt portfolio, because if it was strong at some point and it gets weaker, then it affects the amounts in terms of volumes, but also the amount that we've got to pay back. What other way? The other way COVID-19 has affected our debt portfolio is, you see, when you have a budget deficit, like we are saying there, we have always had a budget deficit around 600 billion in a year. We usually plug it with what? With foreign credit. But when those countries
and grants,
also,
which are not forthcoming.
When those countries also have problems in their economies, including China and the rest of them, everyone right now is looking at the economy and saying, how can we ring fence before we talk about providing financing to other countries? So that's another way I think it has also affected our situation.
I was going through some numbers here that Kenya has received loans from those institutions like IMF, World Bank, African Development Bank to battle this pandemic. And in fact, the stock of public debt jumped by 1.07 trillion shillings from March last year to 7.35 trillion shillings by January this particular year. So, I mean, this is a huge, difference. One would ask, borrowing for things like COVID-19, to manage COVID-19, what ripple effect will this have on the future of this country's economy? How long will it take us to navigate and maneuver and bounce back to normal? I mean, let's look at the future.
Let's look at the future.
How does it look like?
So, let's agree that COVID-19 was, and it still is, was a big shock to our economy, just like any other economy.
Yes.
And government did right in working towards stabilizing, because that's what every economist around the world needed to do in the past 1 year, stabilize the economy so that it doesn't fall. So there are a lot of macroeconomic decisions and policy decisions that government did, including taking credit to make sure that we respond. Because if we did not respond, and I think to a large extent, as much as we feel that government did not respond to the level where we wanted to, the things that were done that has made the economy where it is has not fallen. So taking credit at that point to respond, to me, wasn't a bad policy decision. What I think was the problem is how then the money was spent, or how the money was applied. And that is a conversation that we've always had, and we have never had an answer, in which we are saying this big debt situation we have in our country, to a large extent you can take it back to how we use what we have taken. So to come back to the question about how do we bounce back, one, we have to make sure that the economy is growing again, and we have to identify what sectors we are going to work on to make sure to help us with rebounding. One of the sectors of the economy that has been working very well in our economy is the service sector. And you agree with me that has been the hardest hit by COVID-19. Though even before that, you would hear that tourism numbers had fallen and things like that because of other things in our economic regime. But one way we bounce back is how we can use some of these monies that we are getting to help the service sector, especially entertainment and tourism and related services, to bounce back. There are businesses that perhaps will never come back, but there are others that we can continue to provide funding or who can give reliefs so that they come back and employ more people and grow and pay more tax. So that is one way in the midterm, helping such sectors that have been hard hit. But we can also focus on those sectors that are usually called gladiators that can prospect for better and more sustainable growth in the future. And that's where you can link up the things we are saying we did with the money already, like infrastructure, those many roads that are being cited, that is where the money went. Or the power generation, we are saying, I used to hear Kenyan say they produce more power than our country can consume. But we are the same people complaining about the cost
it's too
of
high.
energy. So the other way we can use this funding or credit is to see how we can expand our manufacturing, how we can make manufacturing work again, how we can make us produce more and sell outside there so that our economy grows beyond depending on agriculture and depending on tourism.
All right. Kenneth, we're coming back to pick up this conversation. The big question is on debt management. Yes, we take up this credit, but then how do we spend it? And this is part of what we had prepared for you. Just a small clip on what our leaders have to say regarding this, and then we'll come back and pick this conversation.
Debt is not rising exponentially. No, it's rising. And as you increase and improve your GDP, definitely the cost also goes up. It is one of the issues that, of course, we will discuss because when you are now doing the budgeting, you look at the revenue that you are getting as a country and also the deficit. And the deficit all the time is addressed through borrowing, whether domestically or also borrowing through concession.
The legislators called on agencies to work together on implementation of government's Big Four agenda.
Again, budget is about treasury. Parliament is about budget, right? In terms of allocating funds and the taxation. Yeah, that's what Parliament was created for. So if the core actor is not here, then it changes the whole thing. And it's not just a technical presentation by the director who can do it. We can read for ourselves. It's about interrogating the policy, the thinking behind the issues. Why are we doing this? The issues you're asking about debt, where are we? Yeah, there's a new metric on debt. Perhaps we're probably not doing as badly when you now look at the cost, the growth adjusted, cost of debt.
Very fundamental questions there being asked. I mean, where do you fall in this conversation? Do you think probably we have missed the point in how we are handling the subject of budgeting, the subject of fiscal planning and public debt in our country? Do we miss the critical issues that should be on the table when we are having these conversations?
I think we do. And if you follow that conversation, especially by Honorable Amos Kimunye, you'll understand. I think the way we are continuing to make especially those debt decisions is not right, because they look almost like it's a preserve of Treasury. They're decisions either between Treasury and the President's Office or State House. Folks decide that this is how we are going to spend, we are going to get this loan, it's going to be for blah, 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 blah. Whilst the best way it needs to be is to involve all the stakeholders, involve Parliament, who are actually the guys who are supposed to be working on approving budget. And you wonder why people's representatives are not part of the conversation about what debt do we take, how much of it, from who do we take it, what is it going to be used to do. And even broadening it to having ordinary citizens. This issue about public participation should not just be a box we tick, but it should be an actual thing, because I do believe that there are educated and clever Kenyans, economists and everything else, who can advise this government on some of the decisions around public debt that they are taking that are not prudent. But the conversation is closed, and perhaps that is an area that we really need to work on. I don't know whether it's through legislation or there are policy or regulations to have Treasury open up the process for determining how we are managing debt to more people, probably from Parliament as well, but also from other sectors, including society and the media. There was a day I remember when one of journalists, I think it's James Smart, they had a conversation with the President, and he asked whether State House can provide the contract for a loan that Kenya was taking from China. The man has never gotten that contract. He's a media guy who you'd expect is in the interest of the public. And if you're saying public finance is open, and therefore things like these contracts and the things that are within them need to be things that are put in public domain. So that conversation in Parliament, but also between Treasury and Parliament and other stakeholders need to happen so that we move away from having debt as this secret thing that is done somewhere. But it's not even secret anyway. It is taken, then 5 or 3 years later on, we see what it's impacting everyone, and it's no longer a secret. You can see right now that this, the things we're suffering or the things citizens are going through are very much linked to those debt decisions, some of which are taken under the table. So one of the biggest areas we have to begin is opening the conversation about how much debt we take, where we take it from, and what we do with it to a lot more people. I think also just in terms of management of the monies that we take or we get through public debt. In one of those documents that IMF presented when they were justifying why they gave Kenya this last loan, if you read it, you will see that one of the areas they feel or they believe is where the problem is in what they call state-owned enterprises.
About 9 of them are supposed to be restructured.
Yeah, well, 9 is just the tip of the iceberg. We are in the country where we are saying we are cash strapped, and therefore, and we have a huge, what is it called, wage bill. We have had, including national conversations about how to reduce the wage bill, but we still have these many state-owned enterprises or state corporations or departments and agencies that at some point we had could be merged or could be restructured so that we reduce our wastage that goes on in the public sector, but that has not happened. But also just in terms of how state-owned enterprises like those corporations, whether it's Kenya Power or it's which one, how they utilize money or credit or that they get from these sources that we're talking about. And you have had conversations around corruption happening in those state-owned corporations and how they eventually impact the cost of projects that we get into, which to me is the second big conversation that we need to have. How much are we losing to corruption and mismanagement and inefficient allocation of resources through the state-owned enterprises? And how much is it coming back to the problem of how we are managing the debt itself?
All right. Yeah. We'll talk about more of those conditions. And I was looking at some of them and I was wondering, if we can meet all these conditions, do we really need the loan then? If we can clean up our systems and make sure that the parastatals actually start, bringing forth profit, and those that are not, probably something is done. I mean, do we really need this? But we'll pick up from there as we continue. Let me just update our viewers on something here. Of course, it's news that I never really thought I would have to, break right here on KBC. But we are mourning as a corporation. One of our video editors, her name is Betty Baraza. Betty was a very passionate person we worked with for so many years right here in the broadcasting house as a video editor, but also a friend that many have so many memories, fond memories of. She was really passionate and would really sink into your world and share deeply with each and every individual. She was shot dead yesterday at her house. She was with her husband and the children. We are still receiving more information about this particular sad incident. The police have commenced investigations on this particular murder case, and it is something that came as an unfortunate incident that happened yesterday night after she had left work and had just driven into her compound together with the husband. And reports that we are receiving is that 3 young men who are wearing masks actually just followed them into the house, and this is when the sad incident happened. We are getting clearer pictures and information about this particular murder incident as the day progresses, with investigations currently underway. I understand we have pictures of the scene of the crime. If we can just play that for you. But Betty Baraza is one of the staff that has worked for the Kenya Broadcasting House for a very long time right now, but we will be giving you more details about this and also showing you pictures about that particular murder scene as we continue. But then again, we have prepared something for you just to remember the lives and times of Betty Baraza, a friend, a sister, a mother, a wife, and a very dedicated employee of the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. This is what we have for you.
Fahamu kuwa ni yako zamu, angalau ungeniambia eti unakam, nitulize hamu wangu wa dhati. Hey, tama zangu zimenikwamia mikononi, labda huu ni mwisho wa dunia. Safiri salama, msalimu Maulana, tutaonana baadaye. Safiri salama, msalimu Maulana, tutaonana baadaye.
I think this is the best day at this point after almost 2 months after COVID.
It's been tough, Bana.
It's been tough.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Wow, you have made my day. Yeah, now they've started coming. Hey, what's happening? Oh, Jackie's the lead. Everything is there.
Tutakesha tu hapo kwa veranda mambo
Na
sawa.
bonfire. Yeah.
Yeah, and may her soul continue to rest in peace. It is a sad incident indeed, and I never knew that I would had to do this for a colleague and a friend. Rest in peace, Betty. All right, now moving on, we have been talking about the debt situation in the country, and in studio this morning, I have been having a sit down with Kenneth Okwaro. Kenneth is an international development specialist, and he's here to shed some light on how we move on as a country going forward, a conversation we are having amidst a very heated debate on how the country is managing its debt situation. And Kenneth, before we went to that very unfortunate news of the demise of my colleague and, you know, an employee of this corporation, we were just exploring some of these conditions that IMF gave for Kenya to qualify for the 255 billion loan. And before that, I actually remember telling you that from where I sit looking at some of these conditions, if we could meet all of them, that probably we may not even need to have such high public debt. One of them include, like you had rightfully mentioned, you know, just sort of restructuring loss-making state-owned enterprises. These are about 9 of them that are targeted. I would cite one like Kenya Power, Kenya Airways, Kenya Railways Corporation, Kenya Airports Authority, and of course the Kenya Ports Authority, among others, which have actually been listed as some of the parastatals that if something is done, then we could actually just qualify for this particular loan. The other thing that I also saw in one of the newspapers this morning that may affect thousands of civil servants is the issue to do with just managing our wage bill. And according to data from the National Treasury and IMF, projections indicates that taxpayers actually have to part with 493 billion in wages and benefits to civil service. They had to part with 493 billion for the financial year 2020-2021, and they're actually seeing this as an increase from what was previously recorded, an increase of 44 billion shillings, and it's also projected to jump to 535 billion in the next financial year and 635 billion by 2024. I mean, is what you know, IMF saying actually you know, making sense for you, that these are things actually we can begin doing different going forward?
First of all, very sorry about your demise of your colleague. Poleni sana. Coming back to that conversation, you already talked about two things. Some of the conditions that, things that IMF is encouraging the government of Kenya to do. If you look at the wording of that document, it's usually encouraging, not rather saying you have to do this.
You have to do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's the way I think they like to word those documents. But on the first one, on state-owned corporations, it's not even a conversation we are supposed to be having today, because if a business is not making profits for 20 years, 10 years plus, what is it? Why is it going on to keep running? And the problem with it is they keep making losses, and we dip into the public coffers to do what? To plug in those losses for them, and then we keep running them for what purpose? That is one thing that we need to ask ourselves. The other thing, and it links to the issue about the wage bill, is why are we having some of these corporations? Somebody asked the other day, why is the Kenya government in the business of selling meat? We have something called the Kenya Meat Commission that again had been down for so many years, and then one year in the budget the government came up and said we have put this number of billions into the Kenya Meat Commission. Why? And there are businessmen and women who buy and sell those same products. What I'm saying is there are state corporations, state agencies, some of which in this day and age do not even exist. If you are the people who are saying the role of government is really to enable private sector to produce, to grow, and to employ people, and to enrich the economy.
But should we interrogate why this is happening? Why the cycle of loss in these parastatals?
But they are basic things. They are basic things. You know, Kenyans are not slow people. Utaenda pale nje, you'll find a shop, a tuck shop. It exists there because it buys things, it sells to people, it retains some of the money, it pays its bills, and then it takes away money. The day it does not do that, the thing will fall. It's the same principle for all these state corporations. If you're in the business of carrying people from here to the UK or to where, it's a business to make sure that it makes economic sense. Why are state corporations in South Africa or in Ethiopia working, or in Dubai? Why do all those airlines work and this one of ours is not working? The same reasons. There are corrupt people in there, there are inefficient people in there. Government is encouraging them to continue doing those things without recourse. Because if you did that in a private enterprise, if somebody was in there who was inept and making sure that the business is not making money, they'll be fired, isn't it?
All right.
Why are we not doing that in the public sector?
All right. Looking at the public wage bill also, just a brief comment on that as well. Is it an area that we also need to relook? Can we, you know, this is something that a conversation we've had for years. Can it help us? And if we can manage to do what IMF is actually encouraging, in your words, do we need to borrow?
This one about the wage bill really messes me up, because even this government, in 2013, we had the summit I was talking about, a national summit about the wage bill. What was the purpose of that summit? Because we already had statistics and information about why the wage bill is as big. One, those agencies we are talking about, or why we are continuing to have to, we have county governments, but we also have some level of government from the national government that equally takes money from the public coffers. You remember the Constitution had said that provincial administration former was going to be abolished. We found ways in which we brought it back into the system, and we have county commissioners and all these guys. And all those contribute to the wage bill, because there's this one guy who heads the region, who has staff, who has cars, who has a house, who is paid allowances, when they come to Nairobi they have per diems and all those things. Those things accumulate into this monster we are calling a wage bill. Or get into any of these offices in town or for government. There is tea. You wonder why people drink that amount of tea in government offices that don't drink at home. There are flowers. Or people are reading 3 newspapers. You wonder why they have to have all the 4 newspapers in front of a desk, on this one, on the next room, and on to the next one. Some of them are really basic things, and if you read those reports, they have been said 1,000 times, that if you do very basic things about reducing some of these small things, There's a time there's a public official who wrote something on the newspaper saying he had been employed, I think, at the level of a PS as an advisor. And he was wondering how at the end of the month he was being given credit. I think Safaricom 20,000, another they need 20,000. I was wondering what is he going to do with all that
With
money?
all that.
So people at home always just knew at the end of the month he brings what? Credit. But that is public money. That's where the tax is going. It's being misused.
Describing all this for a common mwananchi who could be watching would ask, do we then need to borrow? Do we then need to borrow? Must a country borrow? I mean, yeah, just basically.
Well, those are two conversations. There's the one about how we spend the money, but also the other conversation about the necessity for debt, which I will tell you, we need debt. Debt is an instrument for financing our development. All the countries in the world, I think, I don't think there's one that has not borrowed.
Can survive without borrowing.
Yeah, and people will tell you those crazy figures. Japan has 100 and what? The US owes China how much money? Everyone borrows. And we borrow when we have thought through what we want to do with the money. You get? So if we are saying, let's say one of the biggest problems we have in this country is water, including this, the capital city, isn't it?
Yes.
What is the problem? If we say we are going to build some mega dam somewhere to put water there, then bring it here. But it's a project we are going to run over 10 years or over 15 years. So we are not burdening one administration, or we're not saying, oh, this 2 years, we have to get 500 billion to do it. No. We have spread it over 20 years and they're saying we're going to do it in phases. See the big dam that was built in Ethiopia, huge, with a lot of money that you'd expect the public coffers would feel that. But in many cases, they are not things that are focused within that 5 years of when a president comes in, or the 10 years when he's there. And for me, that is the biggest problem.
Can it work in our Kenyan context?
It can.
Where you've seen everybody comes with their appetite for legacy. Nobody wants to take up from where the other left. I mean, can it work in our Kenyan context?
But that is where this conversation needs to face Kenyans as well.
Yeah.
And that's why I liked people who balanced the conversation about people who are going to the IMF and ranting and said, but you're the same guys who put these guys into power. You guys had a second chance when you already seen that debt was going on and was impacting things. Still give them the opportunity to continue doing the same thing. It's the same thing we are talking about here. Politicians promise you things, and you know how in 2022 it's going to be. I am going to build this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to provide this for free. They're never for free. Eventually, the public will pay for them. So if you allow politicians to give lofty promises, and once they give you promises, you have a covenant with them, isn't it? So when they get into government, they have this first 5 years that they have to do things. How do you want them to do those things within those 5 years? They'll overtax you. They will get a lot of credit from outside there. They will do all manner of things that result us to where we are. So I think also the conversation needs to face Kenyans as well.
All right.
What do you want and what are you willing to pay for?
Yeah, and what are you willing to do to get what you want as a Kenyan? It begins at the ballot. Who are you electing?
For me, that's where the biggest conversation must be.
Yeah. All right. Where do you think we spend most when we borrow money, and where should we, spend? Some have argued that spending on, building roads, building structures and development is a good thing, but maybe we need to rethink and put this money where it will generate profit and all that. If you look at this, how do you balance this particular equation?
In my view, if you look at many of those projects that have been done even in only these 2 administrations of Uhuru Kenyatta, in many cases you'll find that there are things that are important. The railway was important.
Yeah.
The road that President Kibaki built was called what? Superhighway was important. The things we're doing in Donguku, all those things are very important things. But the problem we have is how we do them. So we get money to build the railway, but in the process we increase the cost of the railway. So where we are spending the money or where we are getting the loan is that in my view, many times, it's okay. But when we come down to now the administration of the money or the funding, then that's where the problem is. So we have overly increased the costs for building a road. we are notorious for the guys who build roads for crazy amounts of money. And you wonder, so this road, even if we use it for 15 years, will we ever get the economic value to match up to the money that you're talking about? Or that standard gauge railway that you're talking about, people have been balancing it with one in Tanzania, another one in Ethiopia. And you see the balance, you see the type of railway they build the other side with electricity and its speed, and you see the one we built and the amount with which we built ours. So even that, for me, is where we are supposed to be having this conversation. Many times, government has very good ideas about where we are supposed to spend. Like that idea of spending on increasing our production of energy. Because for a long time, you remember the days when Kenya used to have, I don't know whether you're that old, when we used to have...
Be careful where you're going.
Yes. whether those days when we had, what is it called? Power outages. I was in school then when children would go to school in the night that they're reading that there's no electricity. But we sorted that out by producing. And for us to produce, government invested in Kengen, in those things like Olkaria and all those sources. So now we have energy. Now the problem we have is distributing energy, which is the problem with Kenya Power, which now if you asked me if I was advising someone in the position of making decisions for another loan, it will be on how to make sure that Kenya Power or the guys who are distributing electricity can make it more efficient. Because eventually that is what affects the consumer. Or the other thing is those taxes that we levy on the things that then negate the investment we've made. So here you are, you have built a railway that's supposed to make transportation faster. But there are these taxes that you have added on to the process. So in the end, the difference is not
much.
It's not much. Or in the area of energy especially. There's a time during COVID last year when oil prices globally slumped thoroughly, that you would expect that economies where when the prices of oil usually go up, we suffer, Kenyans would have felt that there was a relief. But did people feel that? Because you saw the day when government indicated that they have increased the price of oil. Remember that week when everyone was shouting again, yeah? Because when you saw the government levies and the taxes and you compare with the oil they buy, so you say, so what are these guys doing? Because it eventually affects the cost of energy, which affects the matatu that somebody uses, which affects the cost of unga or the cost of mboga and all those things. So when you hear somebody complaining down there that the economy is hard, the economy is hard because the cost of oil has gone up. Because of oil has gone up because government needed to add more taxes on oil to get more revenues to pay for debt that we took, saying that we are going to reduce the cost of energy. So we are just in a circle that just doesn't make sense. So you want to sympathize with the Kenyan who is saying this economy is not working for me. But you also want to come to the side of government and saying what can they do now? Where they are. That's why when we began with this conversation, I told you, probably it's just that. That is the only instrument that
I don't like how you want us to wind up this conversation. The other one was a bit optimistic and hopeful, that things are going to get better. But for you, I mean, how do we get out of this cycle? Because now we're here, but we are hoping for better. What is it that we need to do going forward as we're just about to wrap up for us to get out of this cycle?
There are many things we can do. Some of them are long-term, some of them are short-term. Some of them require political capital, some of them don't. For example, we are saying that a lot of the money we have got to pay back has got to do with monies we took for construction, say for roads and railways or new projects, so to speak. The first thing I would argue is that government does not get into new projects. New projects that will require that we get more loans or we get more credit that will increase our debt burden. So let's begin there. So let's urge government not to get into new projects. Let's put a lead and say, let us work with these ones.
Let's finish the ones we have.
Yes, so that we don't attract new. So we don't hear next year in January we are building another road where. Let us do that. That is one thing we can do to begin to deal with the problem. The other thing, and which I from my readings, the Cabinet Secretary had already started doing, is renegotiating some of these loans, some of the terms for these loans. You know that when we got into that thing we called the middle income economy, we were very happy that we are big in economy. There are things that happened that when that happened. There's this thing called concessional borrowing, where you get loans at a lower interest rate, longer repayment periods. Some of these things are done for countries that are in the lower income bracket. So when you get into the middle income bracket, you lose some of those.
You lose the benefits.
So there are a lot of commercial loans that our government went at between 2013 and now that are to blame for the reason why the debt portfolio increased and what we need to repay also increased. So again, government can continue doing that, talking to these governments to increase, for example, the repayment period, or if we are supposed to begin paying in 2022, now we begin paying in 2025. So that if we are supposed to add another 100 billion next year, it has been pushed further. So we reduce the stress on the revenues that we have. There are there are a lot of things that government has been trying to do. For example, I think there's been a global conversation with poor countries going to the Paris Club of countries that give people money. And we were allowed, I think, a moratorium, I think, between December and June, that we are not supposed to be paying up to June. So things like that, that the government can continue going to get these concessions from people who have already given us money, who are expecting us to pay, to give us waivers. Sort of like the thing that are done with those mobile money things. Just saying, we have given you a waiver. If you had 3,000 bob, you begin paying it in 1st June. So between now and 1st June, there are things you can do here. You can reorganize yourself. So that's another thing we can do. The other thing, and this one has to be done, is to deal with the corruption that leads to the money being misspent, that makes projects more expensive than they are supposed to be, you see. So we are both looking at reducing incoming loans. We are pushing the periods for repaying some of them, right? We're renegotiating some of them so they are not as expensive as they are. We are dealing with the use of the money itself, you get?
Cleaning up our books, our processes,
Then also we are coming to our public administration, and we are doing those things you're talking about. Realigning and harmonizing our public service so that a lot of money does not go there, so that it frees more money for repaying our debt, but also for development. You see, there are a lot of things that we can do if we are willing.
That's a nice way of ending it, right? At least. At least some dose of a solution on the problem we are facing as a country in terms of our debt crisis. Kenneth Okwaro, an international development specialist and the Executive Director, Africa Center for People Institutions. This morning we were talking about the Kenya's debt burden, the debt management and fiscal planning. Thank you so much for creating time for us. And of course, we just want to pave way for Tamrini, the Swahili version of the program. Don't go too far. My name is Serfine Achieng Ouma. Our sign language interpreter has been Lucy Maura.
Fahamu kuwa ni yako zamu, angalau ungeniambia eti unakam, nitulize hamu wangu wa dhati. Hey, tama zangu zimenikwamia mikononi, labda huu ni mwisho wa dunia. Safiri salama, msalimu Maulana, tutaonana baadaye. Safiri salama, msalimu Maulana, tutaonana baadaye.
I think this is the best day at this point after almost 2 months after COVID.
It's been done, Bana.
It's been done.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Wow, you made my day. Yeah, now they've started coming. Hey, what happened? Everything is there.
Tutakesha tu hapo kwa veranda mambo
Kuna
kama.
bonfire, kuna yeah.
Unajisikia kupika? Quickbit tunakusort na gas cooker. Ni rahisi sana kupata hii gas cooker. Enda kwenye quickbit.co.ke, fuata maagizo, kisha ekelea kodi ya gas cooker yetu ni CK. Alafu fuatanisha na unique bid yoyote ile unafikiria, CK92, CK106, CK57. Ile unafikiria amount ni shilingi 20. Ama enda kwenye lipa na M-Pesa, ni rahisi sana. 4032353. Hiyo ndio paybill number 4032353. Kisha unaweka amount shilingi 20. Tunakuambia kumbuka, kwenye Quickbit ni bidhaa bora zaidi kwenye bei ya chini kwa chini.
Next on.
Naona kidogo. Basi hata huyo mume alisema hivyo. Alafu akamfanya hivi. Akamuuliza tena. Waona baby.
Bebe nitaona vipi unampiga macho hivi?
Basi hata unamini hata hivyo. Wewe ni mtajibu wewe. Hebu chaka na njoni kuna wenyewe. Wasikia wewe? Huku kuna wenyewe. Saa 7 ni saa 5 mpaka saa 6:30. Umesikia?
Next on.
Kuna tabia nyingi sana za kusalimiana kwa mkoana.
Umekuaje lakini?
Ana wewe nini bana? Nini bana? Msemaje na mse barabarani alafu unaniuliza nini mbaya? Ngenigonga nianguke.
Ungeanguka tukuokote. Nini mbaya?
Sasa nisiketi raha tu ya mkono. Unajua mkono wako ni soft. Kaa pampa. Inatoa nini jina?
Sana nzoa.